Hey, everybody, welcome back to Author Eke. I'm Travis, your host, and today I have Jeffrey Higgins. And I went out and I looked at his website, I read his bio. Absolutely amazing. He's been a patriot, to say the least. Um, and he's written some pretty cool books. He's got a new one coming out, I believe, Thursday, you said, this week, which would be the 29th of February.
That's right. It's
So,
Leap Day. It's a forever game. It leaps into the world on Leap Day. It's a cool book birthday. So I only get to celebrate it once every 4 years. But yeah, it's a cool date. I'm looking forward
excellent.
to it. It's a techno thriller that deals with artificial intelligence. And
Oh,
I
wow,
have a
okay.
bunch of manuscripts coming out. I'm with four different publishers, and I've got a bunch of stuff like coming out. But I wanted to
Hmm.
get this one out fast because honestly, the stuff I'm writing about it is starting to like happen and come true. And I wanted to get out in front of it a little bit.
And you don't want the FBI at your house too soon.
That's
so,
right. You know, it's
so
it's
tell us
interesting when you
about,
write about stuff that's like in the world or contemporary
yeah.
issues or whatever. It's really hard with the timing. You know, like I have a book that's coming out with Severn River. It'll be next June,
Hmm.
and I have a scene that takes place in Ukraine, and I wrote that before the war. You know,
Oh,
and so I,
wow.
I had to make some adjustments in that to make
Yeah.
it work.
So tell us about yourself. I mean, you got a very interesting resume, should I
Oh,
say.
thanks. I started as a journalist. I wanted to be a writer all my life. I ended up working as a private investigator in between like journalism jobs, and
Hmm.
I thinking it would be good fodder for books. And that exposed me to a lot of people who want to get into law enforcement who I hadn't been exposed to before, and I got really interested in it. I read a lot of books about it. There was the Underground Empire by Mills was the author, and it was about a group within DEA that looked like at worldwide transnational criminal organizations. I thought it was so fascinating. It got me really interested.
Hmm.
And so, like, once I kind of was bitten by the bug, I became a cop. I was in Tampa, Florida at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office.
I used to
And
work there
oh, did you really?
in
No
Tampa,
kidding.
yeah, where the best or the Outback restaurant had their headquarters right off of Veterans and by the mall, by the big mall by the airport.
Oh yeah. Oh no
Yeah.
kidding. Yeah, no, it's a fun town. I was in patrol at the beginning, and I was in I chose the worst neighborhoods, and I
Hmm.
was in car chases all the time and fighting. I got into a shooting and during my field training,
Oh,
like
wow.
it was a fun place. I worked in street crimes, so I was doing undercover in the hotel motel interdiction unit, and
Hmm.
we would execute our own warrants, so we were kicking indoors a couple times a week. And
Oh,
then I
nice.
ended up in the organized crime bureau before I left, so I was doing detective work at the end, and it was
Hmm.
really interesting. And I went to DEA, and I was in New York, and I worked with the division doing big transnational criminal groups. I'm actually libertarian, so for the drug stuff, everything has a
Yeah.
drug nexus when you're with DEA. But I was going after like Colombian hit crews and
Oh,
violent,
wow.
Dominican groups that were kidnapping people and murdering people. And I went to the task force where I was working with New York State Police and NYPD.
Hmm.
And when 9/11 happened, I was one of the first people. Actually, it was myself, a Suffolk County district attorney investigator, and a female NYPD cop were the first three people to get to that North Tower after it came down.
Well, that's
So,
amazing.
and that day, I just vowed I was going to use my investigative skills and whatever I could do to go after terrorism. And so
Yeah.
for the rest of my career, that's what I tried to do.
Well, keep you busy, to
Yeah,
say the
no, it
least,
certainly
right?
was. I really had to push my agency to get into it, though. They did not want to get subsumed by the newly formed Department of Homeland Security at the time, and they were pushing to be they're a single mission agency for
Hmm.
drugs, and even though everything we worked was collateral with it, like
Right.
murder things. But I pushed them to get into it. So our informant networks are all over the world. DEA has some of the best informant networks, and like counter drug work is very proactive policing, so it
Hmm.
stings, it's infiltrating cells that operate, whether they're drugs or terrorism, they operate the same way, right? These amorphous kind of cells that get general
That makes sense.
direction, but they're
Yeah.
independent. And so, the drug tactics that I'd used really transferred over into like counterterrorism work.
I
And then I went
remember.
to Afghanistan when we opened that office in 2000. And in 2003, I went in the beginning of 2004 as an assistant country attache and stood up the counter
Mhm.
drug police. And
Dang.
I was 4 days there, 4 or 5 days there, and I wrestled a suicide bomber who was trying to blow up a bus. Like we just it was that was crazy.
Because
We
he didn't pay. I mean, where's your ticket? So I remember when I was in the Army, my first tour, 1978. And back then, it was the Red Brigade and the Baader Meinhof gang,
yeah,
right? Those were those terrorists back in Europe that were, they kidnapped, I think, the Italian president, Moro, I believe his name was. But Baader Meinhof gang was definitely really involved in terrorism in Europe, and I think that kind of just manifested itself into what we have today. I mean, there's always been terrorists. I mean, the guy that killed France from Austria to start basically start World War One, terrorist. So they've been around, and now they're just, I think they're more out there because social media gives them a good outlet, to prophesize their propaganda.
Yeah, no, that definitely happens. We've got people. There's a guy in New York who's openly calling for jihad on this in Times Square. He's been doing it for
Yeah.
years. The police know about him. The FBI knows about him. They won't do anything.
Yep.
He's openly calling for specific attacks overseas that are then happening.
Yep.
When you're talking about like Islamic terrorism too, it's a whole different ideological ball game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are people who crave death, who
Right.
want to die, and who want to go to paradise, and it's
Yep.
just different than someone else who has political goals who does not want to end up dead at the end of it.
Which is different from ours. I mean, our most people philosophy is I want to live as long as I can and have a prosperous life, help people, do good. Most people. But then you have the people that don't care and want to die. Then you're like, that's a different kind of enemy to fight, right? Because they fight very more unconventional or more ruthless or barbaric than the other, right? I mean, blowing up whoever, car bomb with 100 pounds of C4 or ammonium nitrate or whatever, set up in the middle of a square and blow it up. You're like, well, that you got to be pretty sick or something to be able,
Well, I mean, they're
because that's indiscriminate.
propagandized from a really young age, and it's a fundamental Islam is a supremacist religion, where if you're
Mm-hmm.
not in the religion, you're expendable,
You're
and,
out.
and that's what not all Muslims believe, obviously, but it's what the fundamentalists believe, and so the
Yep.
people who are blowing themselves up and the people who are radicalizing them in madrasas in Pakistan and
Mm-hmm.
across the Middle East and even in this country, that's what they believe. So it's a different kind of enemy.
So you did some great work, right? Then you said, "Oh, now I want to write a book." so what was the first book you ever wrote, and what was the catalyst behind that?
So I wrote when I was a little kid. Like I would write these horrible, books with like anthropomorphized,
Uh-huh.
animals going on adventures, and I'd illustrate them and things. I always wanted to be
Oh,
a
wow.
writer, and I got
Yeah.
into journalism. So my parents always told me, you can't make a living as a writer, which turns out to be pretty true. And then, then I wrote a
Very
book
true.
like in college and after college, which I didn't finish. The first book I wrote, I kind of wrote in Robert Parker's voice, the Spencer books.
Yeah.
He was one of the people I was reading. I think
Yeah.
most authors do that when they first start out. Whoever they're reading, whoever they idolize, they kind of write in that voice until they find their own. And I wrote a little bit, but through my 25 years in law enforcement, I mean, I spent years like embedded with special forces, with the A teams, and
Mm.
I was in combat with the SEALs, and I was all over the
Mm.
world in these austere environments, and plus with my security clearances, it was really hard like to write. But so when I finally
Yeah.
retired, when I'd done enough and was
Right.
ready, I couldn't
Yep.
wait to get back to writing. So the first book I wrote after that, well, I wrote two, and the first one published was Furious: Sailing into Terror, which is psychological suspense. It's won a bunch of awards. I'm
Mm.
proud of it. With every book you write, you get better. Like when I
Right.
finish one editing iteration on a book and I go back to the beginning, I'm like, oh man, so you do just keep getting better.
Yeah.
Like Malcolm Gladwell has that 10,000 hour rule, to achieve mastery in any discipline. And that's
Mm.
roughly 1 million words for writers, which I'm pretty sure I'm over that now.
Man,
But
that's a lot of words.
it's a lot of words, but I mean, honestly, it's like people, like I'm on LinkedIn, right? So, former military and former cops and agents, they'll reach out to
Mm.
me all the time and say, hey, I want to write a book. And I try to give them advice so they don't make the same mistakes I did.
Right.
And they don't make all these other mistakes where they're spending money when they don't have to. But, I'll say, I used to like read more, but I just don't have the time now. But I'll say,
Mm-hmm.
send me a page, send me your first 2 pages,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I'll get them on the phone and I'll just tell them, because you can see all the like rookie mistakes because I made them and I probably still
Mm-hmm.
make them, but
Yeah.
it's easier to see it in somebody else's work. And but over time you kind of that those rules get ingrained in you and you just stop
Mm-hmm.
making them. So my first
Right.
book I probably did 30 or 40 editing iterations, and now it's like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 tops,
Yeah.
because
What
the,
I
the
do is
first draft's better.
when I'll write and then I'll go back and edit. I mean, I'm not even finished with it. I'll go back and start editing from the beginning. I'll print it and read it and then edit on there and then take it back up and then continue the writing process. and I've done it over time, and I think my writing's gotten better based on the edits that I've got just back from my last book, right, which was more less than I got from the first book. So so how do you pick a time to write? Do you pick a goal to write a day, or you just I'm going to write until the thoughts are done?
Yeah, no, I really believe it's about a writing practice, you know. So like anything else, it's like it's really good to have like you can do a word count, a page count, you can have a number of hours you're working, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's people there isn't one thing that fits everybody, so you kind of have to do what works for you. But if
Yep.
you're
Yep.
spending all your time on Facebook or something, you realize you're not getting your writing done. What I do
Mm-hmm.
is I'm sharpest in the morning, so I'll get up and I'll coffee. I check the email, make sure it's not an emergency, and then I write. And right
Yep.
now, my wife and I have a restaurant. It's her restaurant, and we've turned it into a literary salon. So I'm doing literary events there, but I'm also working as their general manager and front of house manager. So
Well, give
that's
it a
taken up.
plug. Give it
What's
a
that?
plug. Give it a plug.
Yeah, it's Elaine's in Old Town Alexandria. It's on Queen
Okay.
Street. And so we've I mean I've interviewed probably 50 authors there in the last 11 months, you know. So we've give free space to authors.
Mm-hmm.
We've made it this salon where it's like a safe space for readers and writers. We have, Mystery Writers of America and Royal Writers Secret Society and Sisters in Crime and all these groups that come and do events there. And then we
Nice.
host book clubs, and if a writer has a book coming out, I always tell them we'll find a time and
Mm-hmm.
we'll do it for free, and we'll do an interview with you and give you this beautiful space where you can celebrate your work. So that's
Excellent.
taken up a ton of my time, like during the day. So right
Well, I'm
now,
gonna take you up on that because I go to DC often to visit my son. So I'm
yeah,
gonna
no,
pick you up
please
on
do.
that.
And when you have a book coming out or something that's already come out, if you want to do it,
Yeah,
we'll set it up. I mean,
that's awesome.
it's. I'm not a restaurateur. I'm just doing this for my wife right now. But
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that. I enjoy helping
Yeah.
authors out. I mean, I know how hard it is when you have a book out and you go to a Barnes and Noble or something. Maybe you only get a handful of people show up, or
Mm-hmm.
even just trying to get to a venue. And we
Yeah.
don't charge anything, so there's this huge predatory industry that's cropped up around authors, and all they want to do is take money from authors. And I know we're not making anything,
And they don't have any money. They don't
so we
have
don't
any
we don't
money.
take we don't take the only thing I will take from an author when they come is if they want to donate a copy of their book
Of
to the
course.
restaurant. I'll have them sign it to Elaine's and we put it up on a shelf where people can see it.
Yeah. That's a great point that you just brought up, and what I think is every author struggles with is when I look at a book, I cut the book in three pieces. It's writing the book, right? It's getting the book formatted, edited, and ready to go. Then there's a marketing of the book. And those aren't even equal pies. I think marketing is far harder than writing because, like you said, there's so many predatory. I didn't know most of the people that promote books are from Nigeria. I mean, I wouldn't have ever thunk it my whole life, right? But that's where I get all my requests from. So, so what do you find most effective from a marketing perspective?
So marketing is a whole different skill set than the writing, right? It's even
Yep.
different than editing. So, but authors, you have to do it. Even if you're with the big five, you're going to have to do some promotion. And
Mm-hmm.
I like people to think about it more like branding. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not like you're going to do like a podcast and then people are going to buy a ton of your books right after it. I mean, you might sell
Yep.
some, but it's
Yep.
more just the more people see you, hear you, or might be interested in your work. It's about exposure,
Yep.
And the rule in advertising is like they see you like 7 times before they take action. And
Right.
that's probably true. It's sort of what I found is the marketing that's effective is something where people can see your book, like for instance, on an ad, like in Facebook, like Facebook
Mm-hmm.
ads are very effective, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a title, it's a description, it's an image, and then it's the hidden audience of the demographic you're going after. So
Yep.
those four components. So if you have I found that like headlines that are really on the nose, top thriller, that kind of thing, and just tell people exactly what it is with a very compelling image, an image that makes people go, oh, that looks interesting. I want to hear what this is. Then when they look at the description, that has to catch them, right? You have to catch them with the
Mm-hmm.
log line, the short back jacket copy. So when they have that and they can click on it and it takes them right to like an Amazon link page, for example,
Mm-hmm.
that's a pretty effective click through rate and then a sell through rate. If
Mm-hmm.
it's like if you have like a print ad or something, the person has to get it, remember it, or pull up the internet. There's all these other steps that have to go to get them to your book, and I don't think those are very effective, or at least they haven't been in my experience.
I um I equate that to the elevator pitch, right? In sales. Let's say you're in an elevator and you got somebody with you and they ask, what do you do? You got 30 seconds before they get off the elevator. What do you do? Boom, boom. Bottom line up front. Like I said, the picture, right? You got to grab them. You got to get the headlines. You got to grab them. Then you got to let them ask at least a question or two and then set them.
Yeah, it
Right.
has to be intriguing, right? You're competing
Mhm.
as an author with like Netflix and Hulu and all these other
Yeah.
entertainment, passive entertainment. But reading a book, it happens in the reader's mind, so you've got to excite their imagination a little bit.
Mhm.
That's why cover art is so critical, and good
Yes.
publishers know that. And there's a lot of actual data behind what works and what doesn't. And interestingly, there's themes that happen in like Big Five publishing that
Mhm.
have nothing to do with the data. People tend to do what they've done in the past, or a trend happens and one book sells that's within that trend and everyone tries to do it. But it's the image itself. That's what really grabs people, and an intriguing title too.
Yeah, and then after the 50th book in the series, you're like, okay, I'm done. This guy cannot do anything else. I'm not going to read another book he can't do anything else. There's no way. Um, so tell us about your latest book that's coming out on the 29th of February this
Yeah,
year.
so this one deals with artificial intelligence. I actually had a friend who was in that field, and he
Mm-hmm.
knew a CEO of an AI company in Silicon Valley that was offering a friends and family beta program where they would basically download these people's minds, right? And I mean, we're at this coming up on this inflection point with artificial intelligence, and
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing it with like little things, right? Where you'll get AI will, hey, do you want AI to create this text for you or whatever? That's
Yeah.
just the minor stuff. I mean, we're about to hit a point where all life is going to change. Like it literally. I mean, think
Mm-hmm.
about how the internet changed. It's just the information age, how that changed your daily life from like the 1970s to
Yeah.
now. And this is going to be so much more because artificial intelligence will go beyond human understanding. It'll be
Mm-hmm.
moving faster than we can. And when you look at like quantum computing, where they're creating these states where you can have these just massive number of computations happening, I mean, we're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be able to follow it. It's going to be
Right.
at a higher level than humans can understand, right? So
So where do you
everything
think that
is
takes writing? Where do you think that's going to take the literary community? Because now you'll see that people are actually audiobooks. Some of them are AI generated, right? But they don't have the feeling. They don't have the inflection in the voice. They don't have the motions or the mood. And then now, when you publish a book on Amazon, it asks you if it was it AI contribute. Could AI contribute to the book?
So, you
You
get a
know.
lot of people in the literary community who are sort of Luddites. You get a lot of artists who are fearful of change,
Mm,
and I get it. And listen, there's things that artificial intelligence can do that's amazing and
right.
that will extend life for, hundreds of years, right? Like
Mm.
it's amazing what it will be able to do, but there's a huge downside in the back of our minds, right? We're all thinking Skynet and the end of the world and
Terminator.
robot overlords, and there actually is some truth to that. Like
Yeah.
there have to be kill switches. There has to be human intervention
I'd
in
rather
ways.
see it like the Jetsons. I'm
Yeah.
I'm looking for the Jetsons.
So the Jets, but a lot of that stuff. I mean, it'll make everything
Yeah.
easier. Like so in the literary community. Like right now, we're at the very beginning, and you're saying, "Oh, well, the audio is not as good." You're sure, of course, it's not.
Right.
But in a
Right.
year, it will be.
Right.
And one of the things they're doing is now they're taking your own voice. So you, in your own voice, with your own inflection and the way you talk and your cadence
Yeah.
and everything, and they'll do a book with that. So it'll be indistinguishable whether you are reading it or the AI is just using your voice. And so that's just one example. So yeah, I believe audio narrators are going to go away. I believe that'll
Mm-hmm.
just disappear. But it'll take time because I mean, it's so. I don't know if you've ever tried to narrate your own book, but it's brutal. Like it is so hard. You have to
Oh
be an
yeah,
actor.
I couldn't. That was yeah. I already have trouble not putting all the words together when I
No,
speak.
it's
Like
really hard and keeping it
yeah,
interesting and then doing accents and doing different speech patterns with characters. I
yeah.
mean, there's so much to it. So even actors, right, who are like, A-list actors have trouble doing it sometimes. So book narrators who are good at it are as popular as authors. Like people just
Oh
follow the
yeah,
narrators themselves because it's so hard.
yeah.
But eventually I think that will go away. I think things like, graphic artists and cover designers, I think that will go away. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there will always be room for independent creation. I
Right.
mean, at some point, like right now, the writing that comes out of AI is just awful, but that'll change too, and it'll be very
Mm-hmm.
good, But it doesn't mean that a human being can't come up with some unique, high concept thing and can't have a unique human take on it. Eventually, those things will merge, I think. But I think the actual writing, the prose, I think that'll be something that have a much longer life,
Mm-hmm.
even with AI. But all
Yeah.
the mundane things we do now will go away. I mean, think about like,
Right.
having a shirt manufacturing someplace and how it used to be a loom and people had one shirt,
Yeah.
and now and it's good that the mundane jobs are taken over by AI, and that's what's going to happen when we have
Yeah.
self-driving cars. All the deaths go away, all the traffic goes away. These are really good things.
I think the first thing that AI ought to do for business is get rid of all the sea level. because at sea level, all they do is make decisions. Now, the AI can make decisions without emotion.
Right.
Just look on the logic of it, or the bottom line, right? I think a lot of those, sea level positions, other than maybe the CEO because he owns a company or whatever, could be eliminated because they're like, oh, okay, what do I need a CFO for if I do all the calculations without any type of, once I get all the input,
Sure.
or
I mean,
marketing
there's
officer.
certainly a role for that, but also emotion and empathy and some of those things are important as well that a machine
Yeah, for
can't
sure.
recreate, right?
Right, right.
And so like I don't know if you heard about the drone operator who they were using an AI operated drone, and the mission was kill the enemy. And at one point, because there's certain parameters, you can't like attack a civilian center, you can't do this, can't do that.
Right.
At one point, the AI, this just happened like within the last year. This is a real thing, a real military drone. And at one point, the AI figured out, what's holding me back from destroying the enemy? The operator who's telling me all these things I can't do. So it turned on the guy who was operating the drone in the simulation and killed him.
Oh,
So that's something without emotion.
I
But
think I saw that in a movie.
yeah, but it's real. It
Called
actually
War
happened this
Games.
year, and there's lots of it. So having the human component is really good. So in my book, I don't talk
Yeah,
about, I'm not advocating for one thing or the other. It's
yeah.
a thriller. It's a fast paced thing. It's a DEA agent whose girlfriend is dying from cancer. So he quits his job so he can take care of her, and he joins his brother's artificial intelligence company as like a security guy, just as a way to pay the bills. And then
Mm-hmm.
scientists at this company start dying. And so I talk about like the different levels of artificial intelligence a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. Like you don't have to know any of this stuff. I give you just enough to
Right,
keep the plot going. So I'm writing a thriller.
mm-hmm.
I'm not writing a textbook, and quite
Right,
frankly, I don't know it. So I
right.
put in there just what you need to know, and
Mm-hmm.
then and like there's things like with life extending technologies like nanobots, right?
Yep.
They can put these nanobots into your bloodstream, and they can detect and analyze and assess, find disease earlier than we ever could before, and then
Yep.
they can literally treat it all by themselves. And that's the kind of thing that's going to extend life forever. And the fact that we'll be able to recreate organs, we'll be able to, the human substrate which fails
Mm-hmm.
us will be able to be fixed. But it goes beyond that, right? It goes what I was talking about, downloading people's minds, downloading their neural processes. Like
Mm-hmm.
it really brings up these questions about what it means to be human. And when we can do that in a very accurate way, all these ethical and moral questions come up. And certainly the first two of these events is going to make all the money, and
I
and
think if
that.
they downloaded my brain, they would go, "Is that it? Is he already done? I mean, come, come on, give us something else.
It's
Make
fascinating.
tickle him,
It's
tickle
interesting
him, do
stuff.
something." Yeah. So is it present or is it future or
I'm characterizing it as near future, so it's
near
it's
future? Okay.
contemporary, but the technology is just slightly advanced. But so what happened was I wrote this like I started it in 2020. I think I wrote it in 6 months, and it kind of set aside. I have
Yep.
like 11 manuscripts in the process right now with
Mm-hmm.
various publishers, and then I went back to it, and then my publisher was asking for it. I was like, okay, I'll get. So one of my publishers, I gave it to him because the things I was writing about are happening now. Like they were
Yeah.
more theoretical when I did it,
That's
and so I was like,
spooky.
let me just get this thing out. It has a shelf life,
Yeah.
and so I think it's really relevant to what we're going through right now. But it's a thriller. It's just for fun, right? It's
Right.
a fast paced, high energy, high octane kind of thriller. So
I
if
love
it,
doing the research for the books. I do on my thriller series, Team Texarkana. I do a lot of research. I do a lot with satellite and software for satellites. Being able to do different things. Being able to want if I did the job, what would I want it to do? And I come from a technology background, so I do a lot of the research on there, and I love that. And then the latest book, my World War One fiction book, uh, is historical fiction. I did a lot of research, and there's interesting things what you find when you do this research. Just nuggets of things like, wow, that's like where did the name trench coat come from? British, 1916, War, World War One.
but where did it
War,
come from? Like what? Where did
yeah,
they
the
come up with
word,
the name?
yeah, trench coat, and or some other things, or Halloween. Halloween really was not uh, a candy event until World War One, where the government needed something to feed the soldiers to give them high energy quickly.
Oh, interesting.
Hence the chocolate candy bar. I mean, it's a lot of different things when you read that. What I find, so I love to doing the research, and because when I go to a party, I have just a plethora of information that, that everybody's like, "Thanks, we're gonna go over here right now, talk to somebody who's not freaking me out or something."
No, it's interesting, and I mean, it's a double-edged sword too. Like as a writer, because you can get into the research, and then you can just bury yourself in it. And there's a
Yes.
certain amount you have to do, right? If you write things that are just clearly wrong, people aren't able to like suspend their disbelief when they're reading
Yep.
it. It takes them out of the story. So you
Yep.
want to get it right, but also sometimes you do all this research and a lot of it, and then you want to put it in the book because you've done all this work and it's super
Hmm.
interesting. But if it doesn't drive the character, if it doesn't drive plot, you got to
Yep.
take it out.
You got to take it
What
out.
I found is the little things, right? Like there's the little mentions in a sentence of the trench coat or this or that
Yep.
gives people the feel of it, the language of things, and that's enough.
Yeah.
There's
Do
a book,
you
Garden of
does
Beasts
your
by Jeffrey Deaver that I recommend for
uh,
historical fiction. It was one of the best ones I've seen done.
huh. Do you does your book have the same characters in them, or are there new characters in all the books?
So all my books are standalones. I've written a couple to be potential series. The
Hmm.
first one,
Hmm.
Unseen, I had a series mapped out for it.
Hmm.
It did okay, but it didn't do as well as I wanted to, and I had other books. The one I
Hmm.
just wrote certainly could be a series. It's
Right.
definitely
Oh
open for that.
yeah.
I have it in mind, and I just signed a 4-book deal with Seven River Publishing, and they bought the first book, and the next one's due in August. The book I sent them is the Havana Syndrome, and that'll
Hmm.
be out in June of 2025. So that's
Oh,
a
cool.
series, but all the rest are
Excellent.
standalones.
Yeah. When I write my series, I'm like, in the first book, you introduce the team in detail. How much do you do in the subsequent books to get the reader to know who these people are, where they come from, what they do? Because you want to,
Yeah,
copy chapter for chapter. That's interesting to conundrum to
it's
do
it's hard,
to
but
figure it out.
because you want each book to be readable without the reader going all the way back to
Yes,
book one. So if you have
yes,
20 books into a series, but you also have to give them what they need to know, and so you can do it quickly. A few sentences. You don't have to go
yep,
into detail. I mean, I think you can
yep,
do it. You just write on the nose, give them exactly what they need. This is who this is, and whatever.
yep.
You could do it in conversation. You could do it as exposition. Just give it to them,
Mm,
but really fast. What you don't want to do is do these huge info dumps, especially at the beginning of a book. So you need to
right.
like. By the way, that's a good lesson for all writing, right? Like when I first started, I was writing flashbacks and doing. I don't do any of that anymore. It's if I have to get backstory or something like that, I'll do less than a paragraph. I usually try for
Mm,
2 or 3 sentences tops because
right,
you can give them what they need, but you don't really kill the pacing completely. If you
right.
stop the action, and I see this with like first time writers all the time. Page one, they drop you right in the action. You got some things going. By the end of page one, they're already giving you backstory, and
Hmm.
there's no room for backstory in chapter one.
Yeah, I had to do it for my latest one of four. I had to give a back like a 3 page because it set up the rest of the book because it had to be out there in front because some things I did the rest of the book. But yeah, or you got to grab them quick, right? You got to put some action in there quick and go. Okay, now I need to read, 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 read because you want to make it fast paced. Uh, to get them through the story. Uh,
Yeah,
so
the key is you filter it in. You just give them a little bit here and there.
yep.
You can also do it in a conversation. There's a lot of like little techniques you can use where they
Mm-hmm.
hear the readers hearing it, but it's in natural in the conversation or whatever.
Yep.
You can see it done poorly too, right? Where someone's just reciting all the things why they're there and the stakes and everything, and
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
clumsy.
Yeah. You don't want to do that. The one the third in my series is called Behind You, Chef.
Um,
So it's why it's called that, but it's kind of interesting. But I got about halfway done with it, and then I had this idea for this World War One historical fiction book, so I put it away, and I concentrated on the World War One fiction, got it done. Uh, Now I'm going back to this because now it's okay. Now I feel fresh with it. Go back and look at it uh, because it has some backdrop in the Nordost Theater in Moscow. It has a little bit of background on that whole thing. So we'll see, but yeah, it's interesting. So
you're in the minority, by the way. The fact, like so many people, like writers, like I would say the majority of writers do that. You have a great like high concept idea. Some people outline, some people right by the seat of their pants, just get through.
yeah,
But they get to that muddy middle, or they get 30,000 words in, or whatever, and now it's hard. And now they're having issues and plot issues or whatever. And the guys who go back, like you do this too. So you must have a great work ethic because you're doing two things that are huge pitfalls for authors. One is they'll stop and they'll go back and they'll redo chapter one and they'll start over and then
yeah,
they just iterate back and forth and the book never gets finished. The other
mm-hmm.
thing they'll do is they'll have a new shiny idea, and we all get those, right? I keep a
Oh
list.
yeah,
I have 150 or something ideas on a
oh
list.
yeah.
I'm constantly adding
I
to.
got folders full of them.
Yeah, Yeah, write it down and put it away. Like, because
Yeah.
if you stop that book you're writing in, first off, you're out of the world. Now you got to go into another book, and then they get 30,000 words into that one. Then they have another idea, right? So
Yeah.
I always tell people, just get to the end of that book as fast as you can, and then spend
Yeah.
as much time as you want editing it. No one else ever has to see it, but there's really something to be learned by starting a book, getting through that middle, and then finishing it. Then you can go back and you can change character arcs and fix characters and fix plot holes and add scenes and delete scenes. But you can't do that if you don't have it finished. And,
Yeah,
and
I
the reason
usually
I say that
set a
is
date.
most people do that. Most people just don't finish.
Yeah, I set a date. I'll set a date. I want to be done with this book, this date. And I said, okay. So I set this one short fiction mid-February, end of mid-February. I just got back from the editor, right? So I got the cover art and everything. Now I'm going to go, the formatting aspect of it. That's right. When do I want to finish Behind You, Chef? Or Chef Behind You, I think, is probably, August, September sometime, because I need to promote this book.
Mm-hmm.
So you're promoting books, you're writing books, and you're thinking about other stuff to be able to write about.
There's always, I'm doing like 5 projects at the same time. I'm editing a book with Severn River. I'm editing a manuscript that's due to my agent now. That it's a historical thing too, so I know it's kind of what you're going through. I've got this new book launching right now. I have another book for Severn River due in August, and then I have another publisher that was going to come out the book in January. So that's all going on at the same time. Then you have the marketing, then you have the other stuff. So you are super disciplined, but if I would venture that if 90% of the people tried to do the way you're doing it, they would fail. You need incredible discipline to be able to go back to it, and you set good goals. Like, all that's great, but the leaving a book in the middle and going to do something else, that's a huge problem for most people.
Then I'm going back and reading it. I'm going, man, this is pretty cool. Not some of it. But
no, that's great. I mean, by the way, when you go back, and I tell everyone to do this too, when you finish a book, set it aside for a couple of weeks. Then when you come back, it's not what you had in your head and what you wanted to say, it's what you actually said. So you read it like a reader would read it. And when you're reading it going, oh, like half the time you don't even remember writing the stuff, right? You're like, oh my God, this is pretty good. Or,
I can't believe I wrote some of it. Like, where did this come from? I'm not that smart.
We all get that feeling, and that's a really good sign, right? Or if you're surprising yourself and going, "Oh, I would read this," like that's really good. But
that's a big word. We'll have to look something up.
First draft too. It can be fixed. I mean, we do. Everyone does a lot of editing. Then if you're working with an agent, like my agent does a lot of editing. The publishers have editors and layers. Structural editing, copy editing, proofreading. So by the time you get this out there, if you have good editing, a lot of eyes have been on it. I also recommend people use beta readers, like for this Forever game, the techno thriller that's coming out. I had one of the guys who was one of the founders of the internet read it. I had another guy who runs an AI company read it, and they made some great suggestions to make it better. I also have a critique group, and they read early pages and made some great suggestions for me. So
I had a presidential historian and SMU read this historical fiction.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And I would send them some things and say, okay, oh no, this is actual, how we write it, or this is true. So that came in, and he read the whole thing. I just got his feedback, and then the feedback from the proofreader, the editor, is good, and some other folks that have looked at it. Because it's good to get other eyes on it, because you become focused on just looking at it. That's why I have to print it out. I like to print it out and read it like a book. Then you get the pencil out, you mark it up, and that's really helped me on this one. So you got this one coming out on Thursday, which is pretty cool. And so you all excited? You got all your everything lined up. So what I'll do is I'll put this out. I'll put this out tomorrow.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I am just so busy. I haven't even, I posted one time about it. I've got a book launch at a restaurant at Elaine's. And so I did an Eventbrite, and I posted that. So I think I've got a full house. I cap it at 50. I think I've got a full house for that, which will be fun. And then I'll have to do, I'll email everybody I know. It's a big my strategy is always to trigger the Amazon algorithms. 80% of all books are bought on Amazon right now. And that's not just, it's a higher number for digital.
Man, I can't figure that out.
so what you want to, you want to have like the categories, and you always want to have a couple of the smaller categories in there, because if you can reach number one, they give you the little gold number one bestseller. banner, so people see that, but also they'll do free advertising for you. So it'll trigger their own organic advertising where they'll put the numbers 1, 2, and 3 books up. If people are looking for like,
Yeah.
psychological suspense, if yours is in the top 3, they'll have your cover
Yeah.
up there, and then you'll get on the list, and then they'll start. And no one knows how the algorithms work exactly, but they do. Once you get like sustained interest where people are rating it, people are buying it, people are clicking on it. And then Amazon starts recommending it. If you like this, you might also like this. Or if you bought this author,
Right.
you might like this author. But that'll only happen if people show a lot of interest. And there's like
Right.
2.3 million self-published books, and the
There's
majority
so
of them
many
are on
coming out
Amazon.
every month. It's phenomenal how many are coming out every month too.
It's insane. I mean, there's about 3 million books a year that are coming out in English in the US that are available. And so you have to separate yourself somehow from them. So what I found is really sustained sales in those first few weeks can. So like we don't know exactly how the algorithm works, but if you sell 100 books, say they give you a score of 100, I'm just making this up, the numbers. The next day they give you a score that you start at a score of like 50. So you only need half as many sales the next day to maintain it. So if you can actually keep the same sales going, you will grow in ranking. And that's roughly how it's been explained to me how it works. But however it works, sustained sales, sustained engagement will drive it. And so that's what I shoot for. The first few weeks, I really try to get all my friends and family and colleagues, and I'm in a lot of writing groups, and I try to reach out to all of them and say, hey, I'd really appreciate it if you download the book. I mean, you get like a digital copy for what, $6.99 or something. It's like,
it's pretty cheap.
It's basically a latte, but it makes a big difference.
And you can read it while you're drinking a latte. So that's even
coffee not included, right?
Gift certificate on the back. There's the QR code in the back.
Sure.
So that'd be interesting.
That is actually an interesting idea.
That is a good idea to put a QR code on the back and get 1 cup of coffee free at Starbucks.
Yeah, joint promotion with Starbucks where they get like a half off or a free coffee or something, and get Starbucks to put it up on a rack. It's not a bad idea.
I'm always working, man. I'm always working.
So I'm old.
I'd probably do it at a brewery.
Now you're talking. Yeah, that sounds better. Yeah. Half off a Guinness.
Yeah. Well, man. Yeah, I can do that. Well, Jeffrey, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. And most excited about your book, all your books. And again, thank you for what you've done for the country and what you've done to the other people that haven't been good to our country. Mainly that.
I've really enjoyed this. I love talking to other writers. It's one of my favorite things to do. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, when I was writing my first book and wrote it, and I was like, I don't know diddly squat about anything of authoring or writing community or nothing. So what I'll do is I'll start a podcast to talk to other authors, whether they're established, whether they're new, and hopefully I'll be able to provide a little bit of information for them so won't have the pitfalls that I ran into or other authors have ran into, and be able to have a more pleasant experience, because I can tell people that everybody's got a story. You just got to get it out there. Right. And we want to hear it.
Yeah, and by the way, if you have like new authors, I'm going to beg them: do not spend money on things. Do not. If people are coming to you looking for thousands of dollars to do, just don't do it. As an author, you're creating a product, and you should get paid for that product. Yep. And even if you're, you can traditional publish. You can traditional publish with independent publishers. You can go to small presses. Mm-hmm. I would avoid the hybrids. I know there's a few that do a good job and give a reasonable service, but a lot of them are predatory. A lot of them are. And they'll take a ton of money from you, and they won't do anything that you just couldn't do yourself, or hire a couple of people for a few $100 to do. So just be really careful. If anyone's asking you for money, they're making their money from you, not from selling your book. And that's a really just a general rule to understand.
That's a great idea. Well, Jeffrey, it's been a pleasure. And I am going to stop in your restaurant, and I'm going to plan maybe like the 20th of April.
That would be great. If you want to do an event, shoot me an email and we'll get you scheduled. I'll never say no to an author. We'll always.
I think I'll just go in there and have a great dinner, some wine, and introduce my son to y'all's restaurant and wife and everything, and just make it one of our places we like to go to. And we go to
Northern
Virginia.
You're always welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you
very
much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Bye-bye.